All right, as promised, the Las Vegas Xfinity track car guide. All right, so if you ever want to practice before it's that official races week, if you will, you can actually go in here, click on the schedule, and then you can actually just test drive, and it'll give you the conditions or thereabouts of what it'll be like during that week of officials. So that's a good place to start. Just going to leave the weather as is. So hopefully this will be in line with the track state, weather conditions, all that kind of stuff um, when you guys are racing it in the officials next week. And as we're loading in here, just to kind of go over Vegas in general, really fun track, one of my favorites. These intermediate tracks are usually a lot of fun because then you can kind of move around. There's multiple ways to pass or different, lanes or techniques you can use throughout a race to get track position. It's not just like a one single groove racetrack where you feel like you're kind of just in a parade. So use that to your advantage. I think that's first and foremost with tracks like this is to experiment, try different lines. I'll go over the qualifying line with you today, and then we can talk a little bit about race pace, where you kind of want to be putting your car, general strategy, things like that. Starting out with the car setup. Let me just double check that it's coming through okay. Okay, so here's the fixed setup. So that's another thing that's cool about launching it straight from the series schedule, if you will. It will automatically apply that fixed setup to it. And if you're doing your own test session, you can also just go into fixed setups and look for Vegas, load it in, and you'll be all set. All right, looking at it, I'm not going to make a whole lot of changes here. I feel like the offset's probably fine, although just it's really going to be personal preference. But I do like to have a straight wheel. Some people like it to be a little offset, but for me, +6 seems like it's going to probably be straight. Steering ratio, we've talked about this before, but you can see in the description here, the higher the ratio, the slower the response, less twitchy. And then if you lower it, it's going to be more twitchy. So kind of like, I would almost look at like steering ratio as almost if you've played like a shooter on Xbox or PlayStation, or I guess in PC too, but where you can change the sensitivity, the mouse sensitivity. That's probably the best way I would describe steering ratio. Everybody kind of likes to run, a specific sensitivity. And it's really just going to be personal preference. I don't know if there's one's better than the other. I will say that a lower sensitivity, so a higher ratio, is going to give you more wiggle room, just because you won't be making massive turns to the front tires when you're moving the wheel a little bit. Where when you have a higher sensitivity, all those little micro adjustments you make are going to be that much more profound. But I'd say when in doubt, leave it as default. And if you feel like maybe you're struggling with some tire wear, you can maybe drop this, or I'm sorry, increase it to like 14-1 to help you out a little bit there if you're maybe turning the wheel a little bit too much on exits or things like that. All right, putting it back to 12-1, front brake bias. This is another one that's kind of personal preference. Obviously, like you saw in one of the guides, brake bias, you can really affect the handling of the car in certain ways. But it's really going to come down to how you drive the car. Different people have different driving styles in the sense like I like a lot of rear brake because I like to sort of use that to help turn the car, which means I'm going to maybe brake earlier, but I'll be on the brakes longer. Where some people kind of like to do more of a point and shoot technique where, they fire it in there, hit the brakes, it helps the car rotate, and then they sort of just fire it off. And that's what I mean by sort of point and shoot. Or maybe if you run a lot of rear brake bias, you're going to just, kind of sort of, I wouldn't call it a drift, but you're sort of on that slip angle where you sort of just have the car, rotating evenly throughout the corner. And there'll be certain instances at different tracks where one could be better than others. But I would say as a general rule that you will want to decrease the brake bias. For any iRacing fixed setups, they tend to put them a little high, I think, just because then they're going to be a little bit easier to manage, easier to drive. So if you're new, maybe just leave it as is, but if you feel like you're a little bit more experienced, feel free to drop that front brake bias down a little bit. And this is one that's really important to have as mapped on your wheel, or maybe on your keyboard that's close by, or if you have maybe a Steam Deck, whatever you use to kind of make adjustments while you're in the car. This is definitely one that you're going to want to have set up so that you can make those adjustments throughout a run. And now that we've kind of talked about the brake bias, what I'm going to run is I'm going to do 60. We're not going to use any brake bias in qualifying, but if there is a longer run, you may find that you find it useful to kind of have that rear brake bias already sort of dialed in for you. All right, so going out like we're going to do a qualifying lap. We're going to just rip through the gears here. And for the Xfinity car at Vegas this week, your fastest lap is most likely going to be the second lap of the two. So when you know that, and you're confident you've kind of got it down, you're not going to make any mistakes, then you can basically use your first lap to set up your second one. But if you don't feel comfortable, I think it's best to just drive them both like a qualifying lap and do your best, so in case you do have a mistake, it's not gonna hurt you as bad. So we're just gonna send it in here. There's gonna be a lot of bumps in turns 1 and 2 that are gonna want to unsettle the car, so something to keep in mind. And we're gonna come in at 3 and 4 here, and I'm gonna run right up top here because I want to have as much momentum and speed down the straight. As you can see, I'm tracking positive here because I'm going a lot faster than I normally would using that higher line. And if you've really got the car on edge, you can see how much I'm really playing with this wheel. And then we're going to bring it down. Just about clip the grass, and then there's your lap, a 30.185. Okay, I just got done doing the recording and realized I didn't show you guys the qualifying lap from the outside of the car. So I'm just going to do that real quick, and I'll probably just splice this into the video somewhere right after the qualifying laps before we kind of go into the, just driving it, how you would throughout a race or a run there. Okay, so we'll throw it on far chase here. And a little tip for you guys who don't already know this, if you hit Control F12, it will bring up the camera tool. So we'll go ahead and get it a little bit more above, and then back it up so that we can really see what the car is doing here. Kind of make it so you can see in front of me too. There we go. All right, so let's go to the qualifying laps. So here is our first qualifying lap that we're sort of using as a burner to heat up the tires and get ready for, the real heater that's coming up on lap 2. And putting it in a little bit slower of a motion, as we talked about. Running the top, carry as much speed as possible. You can see my throttle in the bottom there, sort of what we're doing here. Then right when we're about to get the wheel straight, we're full on so that we can carry this speed down the straight. Looks like to take the green, I am at, sorry, my wheel blocks it a little bit, 186 right when we cross the line there. So maybe a little bit of a frame of reference for you guys when you're running some qualifying test runs of your own. So here we go. We are, let's kind of straighten this out a little bit so you can see the markers in front of me. A little bit closer. And there we go. Excuse me. Okay, so here we go. Right when we talked about before, you can see I am right after the green light here on the right side, and then we've got the Pennzoil sign. Putting it in slow motion, I'm turning right at that Pennzoil sign. Maybe slightly before it, so maybe between the light and the Pennzoil sign if you guys like references for your corner entry. And then we're just about hitting that first dash line there in turns 1 and 2 for our entry. Staying about a car off of the bottom just so that we don't have to lift or get any of that over rotation. And you can see just how aggressive these bumps are when you're trying to carry some speed through it. Car bottoms out right there. So right about after that first dash line, you can see the bumps really start kicking in. Pretty much hitting my lefts on that last dash line there, or second to last. Middle of my car through there, and then we're going to go ahead and carry that speed off of the exit. So here, since I'm running a qualifying run, I'm not concerned with scrubbing the right front on exit, anything like that. I just want to carry as much speed as possible, or maybe in a race you would want to be a little bit shallower on exit so that you're not wearing that right front as quickly. But coming into turn 3 and 4 here, you're going to start turning in right at the light there. And you can see I'm basically hitting my lefts on that first dash. And you can see how much the car is actually pitched a little bit, especially in these Xfinity cars. How the rear is slightly out. Don't quite get to that white line. But like I said, it's really just going to be about carrying your momentum and your speed through the corner since there's no braking, very little lift. You want to keep your wheel corrections to a minimum because that's going to slow the car down. Obviously, if you need to correct a little bit so you don't crash, do that. But overall, we're about half a car at the most, and we get right at the line, about halfway through the corner, almost touching it, and then we're just going to track out, carry that speed, hit that dash with our right rear, and then lastly, make sure you bring it down to cut the apron on your qualifying lap. So I'm right there at the grass. If anything, you could probably actually even clip it a little bit, and you won't get an incident thing to make it so your lap doesn't count. But really, that's it. That's a qualifying lap at Vegas. We'll do it at full speed here, just so you guys can get a better idea. Maybe we'll run this in the chopper, so you can get a nice bird's eye view of the lap at full speed here. Tracking out, right, that Pennzoil sign turning in, running about a car off the bottom. Really carrying that speed. Turns 3 and 4, we're going to turn right at the light, hit that dash, pretty much get it all the way down, and then just track out with a bunch of speed. I would say a qualifying lap here is not too difficult. There's not a whole lot that you can do in the car to separate yourself since there's not a ton of lifting. It's going to be more about what line you're running and making sure that that rear doesn't kick out too much where you're going to lose speed. And then we'll run it one more time back, but in the in-car. So then you can get both reference points if you want to just keep checking out this piece of the video. Turn in right at the Pennzoil. You can see right where I'm lifting is going to be right before those bumps. A few micro adjustments. Keep the car straight. And then here you can see I've got the full throttle. It's really not until maybe a third of the way through the corner that I'm even off it at all. You really want to send it in there on entry. Tracking down, getting right by that little grass piece there, and then hitting the line for 30.185. And to show you guys kind of the track conditions too, if you want to mimic them. This is probably a half hour ago, but it was 79-ish probably when I went out there, something like that. I can check Garage 61 and put it in the notes of the video. But it should be right in line with the officials next week. and I wish you guys the best of the luck. You can see right where I'm lifting is going to be right before those bumps. A few micro adjustments, keep the car straight. And then here you can see I've got the full throttle. It's really not until maybe a third of the way through the corner that I'm even off it at all. You really want to send it in there on entry. Tracking down, getting right by that little grass piece there, and then hitting the line for 30.185. And to show you guys kind of the track conditions too, if you want to mimic them. This is probably a half hour ago, but it was 79-ish probably when I went out there, something like that. I can check Garage 61 and put it in the notes of the video. But it should be right in line with the officials next week. And I wish you guys the best of the luck. So now to just kind of continue on with the laps, I'll talk about sort of what we're trying to do here. So let's say we're doing our first qualifying lap, we're setting it up. You want to take this very high so that we carry the speed like we talked about. You're going to carry that down the straight. And typically you want to just ride this white line when you're coming to take the green, or start your hot lap. And you want to turn about that Pennzoil sign you saw there. So right after the stoplight, right where you see the Pennzoil sign, and really just shoot it in there. I find that kind of the best way to do that is to basically just send it in like full throttle, and don't really worry about lifting until you're about to hit those bumps. And something with the Xfinity car, and actually here we come to 1 and 2 again, you can see that Pennzoil sign, there's the light, I'm turning in, really just sending it in there. And then letting it wash up on exit. Whoops. 3 and 4, you want to turn in right at that green light. Kind of the same concept, you really want to just ship it in there. And you're never going to be fully off throttle. I'd say maybe at the most you'll be at 60% throttle will be the most lifting you're going to do. Same thing here again. We're going to send it in here. I'm really on it until about that bump. And then I'm just really just managing the throttle on exit. Right there at the light, sending it in. So it's a little bit of a shallow entry for the qualifying line. And then for the race, that's something you might want to back up. I will say in iRacing officials, usually you're better off just being aggressive because there are a lot of cautions and things like that. So tire savings not a huge deal, especially in the lower skill ratings or lobbies, if you will. It can be a little bit crazy and hectic in there, and if you're not real confident in saving tires, and that's probably not going to be a part of the winning strategy anyways, I would say just focus on hitting your marks and running a smooth, even line. That's going to really benefit your tires more than anything. Before you need to worry about kind of what lines you're running and things like that to benefit the tires, the biggest thing is you just want to be smooth. One of my favorite sayings that I always try and think back on is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And what I mean by that is that you want to be very slow with your inputs. So whether that's with the wheel, like, you don't want to be doing things like this, or big corrections in the corner, that's going to unsettle the car. Same with what you do with your gas and brake. So like I come off the throttle, and if anything, I could probably be a little bit smoother, but you can see here, whoop. You want to really be smooth with your application, on and off. Because the more abrupt it's going to be, the more it's going to, shift the weight of the car forwards or backwards, the more aggressive you are with your throttle. And that's going to be more of a point in a race. Qualifying, you really just want to do whatever it takes to go the fastest. So that might be sort of, doing a light switch throttle in a sense. But that's not going to be good for your tire wear, it's not going to be smooth, and you're going to be prone to make mistakes. And one slide in a corner can really affect your tires, not only in the next coming laps, but the wear too. So it's something you really want to minimize so that you can kind of keep that even temperature distribution on all of your tires. And it's really just about being smooth. So not only do you want to be very intentional but slow with your, how you're driving the car, you want to make sure that your wheel inputs are nice and smooth. You see how I'm not really turning the wheel a whole lot. You're kind of just letting the car do its thing, follow the banking. And then in terms of in the race, kind of what you can do to minimize tire wear, or something that's really going to affect a lot of people who aren't cognizant of it, I should say, is right here. Right here, it's really easy where the car is going to want to wash up on exit. And not as much in the Xfinity because it really kind of drives off the right rear. But you'll have a tendency to really try and turn the car too much because it'll start getting tight and you'll keep turning the wheel and turning the wheel. That's really what's going to really just destroy the tires. Is going to be your wheel inputs. Of course, your speed's going to factor in, and that, that's something to consider. What liner you're running. But it's really going to be about how much turn you're putting in the wheel. Because the more turn you're putting in, the more you're scrubbing the tires, and the faster they're going to wear. So if you need to maybe delay you getting back on the throttle by a quarter of a second, half a second, whatever it takes to make sure you've got your car fully rotated, that's going to make all the difference over a 20 or 30 lap run. So if you are in a situation where you feel like the race isn't going to be just a caution fest, then that's something to keep in mind. But overall, I'd say at Vegas, and just iRacing officials in general, I gotta pay better attention, I keep touching the wall, is that you want to really just get that track position. I think that's the biggest thing if you're trying to move up in rating or whatever. And then also, not only because there's going to be a lot of cautions, so you don't really have to worry about your tire wear, but a big one a lot of people don't probably think of, or maybe you do, is going to be the wrecks. So if there are wrecks, obviously, you think it's common sense, but maybe if you don't think about it in this way, is that the less cars you have in front of you, the less cars you have a chance of wrecking in front of you. Not to mention, usually the fastest guys who are out front during a race aren't usually the guys that are usually wrecking. That's that's a general statement. Some people are pretty aggressive and there can be wrecks at the front for the win, things like that. But overall, you're going to be much safer up front because there's less cars. And then, like I said, the racecraft of the guys up front is usually going to be that much better. Also, not to mention, if you fall too far back, you're going to be around cars that may already have damage. So are they going to be off the pace? Or are they going to be pissed off at somebody? So then they're going to be trying to wreck them in front of you. All kind of things you want to keep in mind. And with Vegas, like I talked about right in the beginning of the video, you can really kind of run any line. So here I'll switch my telemetry to be last lap so we can do a little bit of a comparison here. So here, well, actually, we'll wait until we start the next lap. But you can run lots of different lines at Vegas, especially in 1 and 2. So here we are, coming to start the lap. I'll just run a regular lap like I have been, and then we'll run higher lanes so you can get a good comparison. So here, if you can kind of keep it towards the bottom, it'll almost wrap the car for you, which is nice. And something I feel like a lot of people don't take advantage of. Same with in 3 and 4. 3 and 4 actually especially. If you can get right on that line, it'll actually kind of pull the car around the track for you. Even more so in maybe something like the next gen car. Or the Xfinity car, maybe it's not as beneficial just because it really kind of runs a little loose on its own. So here now we're going to run, we're basically a lane up, right? And you can see it's basically the same. I might even gain this a little bit back down the straightaway just because I'm carrying that much more speed. And then same here in 3 and 4. We're about a car up. I might lose a little bit in the center. But we're basically gaining it back down the straightaway. Same if you want to run the top. You can hit it real high up here. Oh, I hit the bumps a little too hard there. Put it in the wall. So it shows you how much I've practiced before this. But with the high line, kind of the same thing. really just want to send it in there, carry your speed, go, and then get the speed off of the corner to make your passes. I wouldn't recommend running the top often, because it's going to wear the tires that much faster. But it's something that you can use, you know, kind of that tool in your toolbox to set up passes. That's a lot of times when I'll run the top lane. I'm not going to run it when I'm single file, or I have a big lead, or, you know, the guy in front of me is 4 seconds ahead. I'm going to use it when I can't get by a guy, so that I'll have all this speed. So say that's the guy, and then I send it inside right before we go into the corner. And what you'll find is at most racetracks, the top is going to be faster. In terms of if you're racing side by side with somebody, the top is almost always going to be the best line. Not always, obviously there's certain tracks where it's not going to be like that, like maybe Martinsville, for example. But a lot of times the top car is going to have the advantage. So when in doubt, I would say run the top. Because when you're running the top, you also kind of have the control. So say there's a car on my inside, I can kind of pin him down. And it's not something you want to do often. It's kind of, I would say, maybe not as friendly as it could be. But if you're racing for the win on the last lap or two, those are the kind of tricks you can do to sort of keep them from getting any kind of exit speed. So like here, we're running the second lane. Get the speed, and then I could jump out and take the inside going into 3 and 4. And you can see now I'm about 20 laps into the run, and the front tires are starting to go a little bit, so I'm having a little bit of trouble getting the car to turn in the center. And that's why you really want to protect that right front when you can, and you can do that by sort of, you know, easing into your corners, by, you know, being very patient with the throttle, getting on it, getting off of it. And then also, like I talked about before, the car is going to get tight. And when it does get tight, you really need to listen to it, right? And what I mean by that is that when it starts to get tight, that does not mean turn more. That's just going to wear your tires that much faster and keep escalating the situation that you're dealing with. Or if you feel like you need to turn that little bit more to get through that corner because you're battling with somebody, you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of tire, then take that mental note, okay, the car's getting tight, so I need to lift just a little bit earlier so that the car is going to rotate like I need it to in the center. And Vegas is weird, especially in the Xfinity, where it's going to be sort of loose in the center, and then it might get tight off, or depending on how you position the car, maybe it's going to get loose on exit too. And it's okay to be a little bit loose, but you really want to keep the rear end from sliding out too much, because then you're just going to be burning up right rear tire with really no benefit, and it's going to wear it quicker, so you're obviously going to lose speed. Now, the last thing I think I'll pretty much cover, I think that'll cover, you know, Vegas just overall, is that oh, no, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, that's what I was going to say. Got off my train of thought there. So with the Xfinity car, not just at Vegas, but at intermediates and really just in general, it drives off the right rear like I mentioned earlier. And I've always found that to be really good at the Xfinity car, it's going to be how well you manage the throttle. Because that's kind of what turns the car, gets it going through the corner, it's going to affect your tire wear, and when it drives off the right rear, that's sort of what that means, is that you're going to basically be driving it with your throttle pedal. Where, you know, for example, the next gen that I race a lot of too, that's more something I find driving off of the brake pedal, where I'm playing with the master cylinders, the brake bias, so I'm using that to turn the car, where in the Xfinity car, I've always found that the throttle's the best way to get it to turn. Like I said before, though, you don't want to overdo it, but think about that when you're driving, that you're really trying to manage the throttle to keep the car a little bit pitched, so it's almost like in a drift, but not quite. And they call that the slip angle, which is basically what the slip angle is it's right where you're on that edge of grip, where you're just about to start losing the rear, but you're also almost in a four-wheel slide like a drift, but it's so soft. I can't think of the right word, but it's so minor that you can't really tell that the car's sort of four-wheel drifting around the corner, but that's essentially what's happening. So you're right on that edge of grip, and that's going to be the fastest, because when you've got that little bit of slide, it's going to help the car turn and carry that speed through the center and then through exit as well. So I think just overall with the Xfinity car, especially since this is the first video driving the Xfinity car, you really want to just be managing your throttle and driving it off of the right rear. And you're really not going to use much brake. So like here, what are we? We're almost probably 30 laps in, and I haven't used the brake at all. Still just doing the lift, riding it through the center. Oh, see, I got a little bit loose there. And then also something I guess I'll mention too is that I've talked a lot about tire saving, and I think it's important, especially in league racing and things like that. But in the officials, it's not going to be as important, especially when you're at a lower skill rating. And two, a lot of people seem to overdo it with the tire saving. So something to keep in mind is you shouldn't be losing more than a couple tenths a lap saving tires. There are certain special circumstances, just like anything in life, where maybe it could be beneficial. But a general rule of thumb is you don't really want to be losing more than a tenth or two per lap when you're saving tires. You're just doing that little bit less to the car to conserve a little bit in the tank for later. But like here, you'll see that you really do. Another thing that I didn't focus on but want to show you is that when you're driving NASCAR cars, you really don't want to be full throttle if you're turning the wheel. A good spot that I've found is that I usually won't go above that line that you can see right before the top of each pedal marker on the iRacing display until the wheel is straight. So say I'm coming through this corner, okay, it's rotated, now I can really get on it. I'm not full throttle until about here. And that's because that's another, like, one of those, weird things with iRacing, I think, or just in general, where it's going to add a lot more wear than the benefit you're getting from the speed. So it's wheel straight, now we're on the gas. And that'll keep the car from sort of washing up, getting that tight off. Oh, we're a little loose. Okay, so just to kind of cement the point with the tire saving here, I'm going to do one lap as if I'm tire saving a little bit, right? So here we are, trying to be pretty nice to it, not let the rear kick out. Same thing here, being very nice to the throttle. And now I'll go for a push lap. So here I'm going to send it in real hard. And you can see, very small difference. I'm only about half a tenth faster in that corner. Send it in a little fast this time again. Really wrapping that white line. So you can see I'm not even a tenth faster running as hard as I can. So that's what I mean by sort of tire saving, where you're just being that little bit gentler with your inputs, and it's going to pay off a ton in the long run. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and practice a pit stop. I have not practiced this beforehand, but you want to get it to the bottom here, crank up that brake bias a little bit, and then as we come close to pit road, slow it down, and then get to your pit speed. And that pretty much wraps up the Xfinity car at Vegas. I will pull up my laps that I did, because I feel like we've done quite a few now. I did a 30.185 as kind of my qualifying lap, and then the tires fall off pretty quickly. So it looks like by lap 6, 7-ish here, it's fallen off 2 or 3 tenths. Obviously, I was sort of not really managing the pace like I normally would in a race as I was talking. But between, we'll say, a regular race lap, we'll say it's a 30.5-ish in here, 4 to 5-ish. We're all the way up to a 131.95 or a 132. So there's almost 2 seconds of fall off. So it is going to be important to make sure you are managing those inputs, because even if it's a 20 lap run, 10 lap run, it will make a little bit of a difference. But the key is to not give up too much track position. If you're losing more than, I don't know, maybe 5 spots, something like that, then you're obviously saving way too much. Because something that people forget too is maybe you have a lot better tire than the guys in front of you, but you're having trouble passing them. Well, sometimes I've found, especially in the beginning for me, where I would, really try and save tire at the tracks I knew I needed to, because I knew over a 30 lap run, the total time would be faster. But the thing is that every time you have to pass somebody, you're going to have to use more tire. Are you going to be on the inside, so you're going to have to turn that much more on exit because there's going to be a car outside of you, or are you going to have to run the outside lane and carry more speed? So you're going to heat up the tires quicker and burn them off that way. So something to keep in mind when you're saving tires, you don't want to give up too many spots, because you're just going to end up burning up all the extra tire that you have, trying to get your spots back. And especially in an iRacing official where there's lots of cautions, you're probably not going to see the benefit, and especially not going to see like a 30 lap run or a 40 lap run in an Xfinity race. Not to say that I haven't seen them before, but they are rare, especially in the lower splits. So I hope this guide was helpful to you guys. This is my first time ever doing one. If you have any suggestions, tips, things like that that we can improve upon, let me know. This was just kind of a get the video out there, get some feedback on it. Hopefully you guys find these tips helpful. And if you have any questions too, you guys know where to reach me at. Always happy to help. But we will leave it with that. Thanks, guys.